Have you ever woken up from a dream that felt less like a story and more like an equation? You did not see human faces. You did not walk through familiar streets. Instead, you saw glowing geometric shapes, perfectly balanced circles, intricate squares, spinning lattices, or repeating sequences of numbers. When you wake from a dream like that, a strange feeling lingers in your chest. It does not feel like a normal dream. It feels old, cold, and deeply significant. Your rational mind tries to brush it off as random brain activity, but something inside you knows that those shapes and numbers were not an accident. Carl Jung spent decades studying these exact phenomena. He realized that when our conscious lives fall into chaos, the deepest layers of our mind do not speak in words. They speak in sacred geometry and numbers. Most of our dreams are populated by emotional narratives. We are chased by figures from our past, we fail exams we never studied for, or we fly over landscapes we have never seen. These dreams are painted with the colors of our daily personal life. They draw from our ego, our personal memories, and our immediate stress. But occasionally, the personal narrative vanishes entirely. The psychological stage is cleared of actors, dialogue, and earthly scenes. In their place appears an abstract architecture, glowing spheres, pristine cubes, intersecting triangles, or a persistent sequence of numbers like 3, 4, or 12. When people experience this, they often feel bewildered. It can feel cold, almost mechanical, yet at the same time strangely sacred. There is an overwhelming sense of order in these dreams, a quiet authority that forces you to pay attention even if you do not understand what you are looking at. Why would your unconscious mind strip away human emotion and present you with raw geometry? Jung observed that these abstract mathematical dreams tend to happen during specific moments in a person's life. They arrive when your conscious world is falling apart. You might be going through a devastating breakup, a career burnout, an existential crisis, or a complete loss of identity. The noise of your outer life has become so deafening that your ego feels fragmented, scattered into 1,000 pieces. When the surface of your life is drowning in chaos, the surface layers of your mind cannot help you. Your daily thoughts are too chaotic to offer a solution. That is when the mind reaches down to its deepest foundational layer, the collective unconscious. At that profound depth, your psyche does not care about your daily drama. It cares about survival and balance. It seeks to restore order to a system that is breaking down. And to build order out of total chaos, the mind uses the most primitive, timeless building blocks available to human consciousness: numbers and geometric forms. To understand why geometry appears in our dreams, we have to look at one of the most difficult periods of Carl Jung's life. In 1913, Jung experienced a profound psychological rupture. He severed his professional relationship with Sigmund Freud, a mentor he had loved and revered. Shortly after, World War I broke out, engulfing Europe in unimaginable horror. Jung felt as though his own mind was fracturing. He was overwhelmed by terrifying visions, intense emotional storms, and internal chaos. He felt he was on the verge of a complete mental breakdown. During this period of intense disorientation, Jung began a daily ritual. Every morning, in a small notebook, he drew a small circular design. He did not plan these drawings in advance. He simply let his hand move, sketching circles, dividing them into 4 segments, filling them with symmetrical patterns, colors, and symbols. Day after day, he noticed something remarkable. On days when he felt deeply anxious and fragmented, his circular drawings were sharp, chaotic, and unbalanced. On days when he felt a sense of internal peace, the drawings were harmonious, perfectly centered, and deeply satisfying. Jung realized that these circular drawings were direct mirrors of his current psychological state. They were not just art. They were an unconscious self-portrait of his inner world. He discovered that the mind was instinctively trying to center itself around a single point. Jung gave these circular structures a name, drawing from an ancient Sanskrit word, the mandala. In Sanskrit, the word mandala simply means circle, but across thousands of years and vast geographical distances, the mandala has appeared in almost every human culture. You see it in the elaborate sand paintings of Tibetan monks. You see it in the rose windows of medieval Christian cathedrals. You see it in the healing medicine wheels of Native American traditions and the calendar stones of the Aztecs. Why would cultures that had no contact with each other create the exact same circular, symmetrical forms in their sacred art? Jung realized that the mandala was not a cultural invention. It was an archetype. It was a hardwired pattern inside the human collective unconscious. When human beings face the mystery of existence, or when they face severe internal fragmentation, the psyche spontaneously produces the archetype of the circle to create a safe boundary and pull the self back together. When a mandala appears in your dream, whether it is a glowing mandala wheel, a flower with symmetrical petals, or a complex round machine, your unconscious mind is performing an act of self-healing. It is attempting to create a center where there was no center. It is drawing a circle around your internal chaos, saying, here is the boundary and here is the core. In Jungian psychology, the center of the mandala does not represent your ego. Your ego is just the tiny part of you that thinks, worries, and plans your daily life. The center of the mandala represents something much larger, the self. The self, spelled with a capital S, is the archetype of psychological wholeness. It includes your conscious mind, but also your vast unconscious mind, your shadow, your hidden potential, and your innate wisdom. While the ego feels constantly threatened by outer events, the self remains eternally balanced, quiet, and complete. When you dream of geometric shapes, the self is sending a signal to the ego. It is showing you the blueprint of wholeness. Consider the basic geometric shapes that often populate these dreams. Each shape carries a specific psychological meaning that human beings have intuitively recognized for thousands of years. The circle represents unity, eternity, and the boundary of the soul. It has no beginning and no end. It holds everything together within its border. When you dream of a circle, your mind is seeking containment and completeness. The square, on the other hand, represents earthly reality, physical structure, and stability. While the circle belongs to the realm of the eternal, the square belongs to the physical world. It has 4 equal sides and 4 right angles. It is grounded, solid, and real. One of the most famous psychological motifs Jung studied was what ancient alchemists called the squaring of the circle. In medieval alchemy, squarers tried to solve a mathematical puzzle: how to create a square with the exact same area as a given circle using only a compass and a straight edge. Symbolically, this was not just math. It represented the ultimate goal of human transformation, bringing the divine, unbounded energy of the spirit, represented by the circle, into the practical, structured reality of everyday life, represented by the square. If you dream of a square inside a circle, or a circle inside a square, your psyche is struggling with this exact integration. It is trying to take your grandest spiritual insights or deep emotional longings and give them a physical form in your real-world life. Then there is the triangle. Unlike the stability of the square or the completeness of the circle, the triangle represents dynamic movement, tension, and direction. It points somewhere. A triangle consists of 3 points, 2 opposing forces at the base, and a third point above them that resolves their conflict. This brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of Jungian thought, the psychological meaning of numbers in dreams. To modern people, numbers are just cold, logical tools used for counting money, measuring distance, or solving equations. But Jung warned against viewing numbers purely through this modern, reductionist lens. Jung believed that numbers were not invented by human beings, they were discovered. He viewed numbers as the most fundamental archetypes of order in existence. Before there was language, before there were human emotions, there was number. 1, 2, 3, 4. When numbers appear in your dreams, they are not asking you to do arithmetic. They are communicating the structural state of your psychological development. The number 1 represents primal unity. It is the state of total wholeness, but an unconscious wholeness. It is the origin point before any conflict begins. The number 2 represents duality, division, and conflict. The moment 1 becomes 2, the world splits into opposites: light and dark, conscious and unconscious, male and female, ego and shadow. Dreaming of the number 2, or pairs of identical objects, often indicates that you are trapped in a fierce internal conflict. You are torn between two choices, two identities, or two opposing emotions. The number 3 represents dynamic movement, action, and time. It takes the conflict of two and introduces a third element that sets things in motion. Think of the past, present, and future, or father, mother, and child. 3 is the number of process and transformation. However, Jung noticed something critical about the number 3. It is fundamentally unstable. It is a state of transition, not a state of rest. This led Jung to his most famous numerical observation, the primacy of the number 4. Jung observed that across myths, religions, and psychological dreams, the number 4 appears repeatedly as the symbol of complete stability and psychic wholeness. He called this the principle of the quaternity. We see 4 everywhere in our physical and mental architecture. There are 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. There are 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter. There are 4 classical elements: earth, air, fire, water. In Jung's theory of personality, there are 4 fundamental psychological functions through which we experience the world: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. Jung noticed that most people tend to rely on 2 or 3 of these functions while completely neglecting the 4th. For example, a person might be brilliant at logical thinking and sharp sensation, but totally disconnected from their feelings. That 4th neglected function drops down into the deep unconscious, where it becomes what Jung called the inferior function. When your unconscious mind presents you with the number 4 in a dream, 4 doors, 4 pillars, 4 animals, or a square room, it is often demanding that you pay attention to that missing 4th piece. It is telling you that your life cannot be balanced until you integrate the part of yourself you have rejected. This was not just theoretical for Jung. One of the most famous cases in depth psychology involved the brilliant quantum physicist and Nobel laureate Wolfgang Pauli. Pauli was a master of logical, mathematical thinking. He lived almost entirely in his intellect, but his personal life was in complete ruin. He suffered from severe depression, alcoholism, and emotional breakdowns. He sought help from Jung. Over the course of their work together, Pauli recorded hundreds of incredibly vivid, highly mathematical dreams. Despite being a cold, rational scientist, Pauli's unconscious mind was flooding him with images of sacred geometry. In one of Pauli's most famous dreams, he saw a grand cosmic device, which he called the world clock. It consisted of 2 distinct circles, one vertical and one horizontal, rotating around a shared center. The clock was framed by a ring divided into 4 distinct colors, with a small pointer swinging like a pendulum. When Pauli woke up, he was filled with an overwhelming sense of sublime harmony. The dream had given him something his brilliant scientific intellect could never provide: a direct experience of the ordered wholeness of the universe and his own soul. Jung and Pauli spent years analyzing this dream. They realized that the world clock was a modern mandala, generated by the unconscious mind of a 20th century physicist. It showed that no matter how sophisticated or rational we become, the ancient archetypal patterns inside us remain unchanged. When you experience dreams of geometry or numbers, it is easy to fall into 2 major traps. The first trap is total dismissal. This is the path of the modern hyper-rationalist who says, "It is just random firing of neurons, it means nothing." By brushing it off, you miss a vital message from your deep self, an invitation to restore balance to your life. The second trap is mystical superstition. This is where people take dream numbers and treat them like magic lottery tickets, or fall into obsessive numerology trying to predict the future. Jung was very clear about this. Geometric and numerical dreams are not fortune-telling devices. They are psychological mirrors. They reflect the structural state of your inner world today, right now. So, how can you practically work with these dreams when they arrive? First, record the exact geometry or sequence. When you wake up from a dream involving shapes or numbers, write down the details immediately. Do not just write, "I saw a circle." Describe it precisely. Was it rotating? Was it still? Was it divided into 3 parts, 4 parts, or 8 parts? Were the lines sharp or soft? Was it glowing or made of stone? Second, express the geometry visually. One of the most powerful practices Jung recommended was to actively bring the dream object into physical reality. Take a piece of paper, a compass, or a ruler, and draw the shape you saw. You do not need to be an artist. The simple physical act of drawing the geometric pattern helps bridge the gap between your unconscious mind and your conscious awareness. As you draw, pay attention to how your body feels. Which part of the shape feels comforting? Which part feels uncomfortable or incomplete? Third, ask yourself 4 reflective questions. Where in my daily life am I experiencing total chaos right now? Recognizing where your life feels out of control helps you understand why your psyche is producing a symbol of order. Which number dominated the dream, and what stage of transformation does it mirror? Are you in a state of conflict, represented by 2? Are you in a state of dynamic movement, represented by 3? Or are you being called to settle into grounded stability, represented by 4? What is my missing 4th element? Look at Jung's 4 psychological functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. If you are a person who lives entirely in your head, dreaming of 4 may be a signal that your suppressed emotional or physical self needs space to exist. What part of your nature have you left out of your daily life? Can I step back from the temporary noise of my life and reconnect with my center? The mandala reminds you that your ego's panic is not the whole story. At your core, there is a quiet, indestructible center that remains undisturbed by the storms on the surface. We live in a world that feels increasingly chaotic, fast-paced, and fragmented. We are constantly pulled in 1,000 directions by notifications, obligations, worries, and noise. It is easy to lose our footing and feel as though we are spinning out of control. But your mind possesses an ancient, built-in navigation system. When the outer world becomes too loud, your deeper self speaks in the quiet, timeless language of geometry. The next time you wake up from a dream of glowing circles, balanced squares, or repeating sequences of numbers, do not be afraid of its abstract coldness. Recognize it for what it truly is: a loving intervention from the deepest part of your soul. It is a gentle reminder that beneath the messy, complicated story of your daily life, there is an underlying structure of beauty, balance, and order. And that no matter how lost you may feel on the surface, your true sense